The Hedera space remains on fire. HBAR is showing strength and resilience, and we have a ton of news for you, including some really big launches. We also have some great interviews for you today. And the first sport of crypto, Karate Combat, of course, built on Hedera, is throwing another massive event down there in Miami, Karate Combat 51, and we're going to get some more details for you on that in a little bit. Welcome back. I'm Brandon, the HBAR Bull, here once again to give you the latest in the Hedera ecosystem. But as always, none of this is financial advice. Use it for entertainment or educational purposes only. So like I said, HBAR is still doing really well. We're going to do a deep dive into the HBAR price here at the end of the segment, but this brings me to something that I've talked about a fair amount in the past, and it's price and value. They certainly aren't the same thing. Price can be influenced by a lot, but value is the real substance behind an asset. And it's the difference between the two where the opportunity lies. And I'll go a step further here and say it's the difference between the current price and the future potential value is where that real opportunity lies. And HBAR is really far on one side of the spectrum when we're talking about this. There's a lot of tokens out there that might have a high market cap, a high price, but there's not a lot of substance behind it. It's mostly hype. There's not a lot of value there. HBAR is completely on the other side. As I mentioned, it has so much that's been built on the network. There is so much as far as use cases, as far as infrastructure that's been built out, and there's so much potential. Now, that all said, we do have to attract as much capital into the Hedera ecosystem as possible to give this network the best chance it has to success and bringing the potential that we know is possible to fruition. Now, HBAR is our most important strategic asset. And this is why I'm often really focused on the entire ecosystem remaining focused on the HBAR holder. That's the medium through which a lot of this capital will come through. And the most important scoreboard is the relative performance on CoinMarketCap. Now, we've had a fantastic run lately, moving from about 50 on the CoinMarketCap list down to the teens where we sit right now. But we have a lot of work to do. I want to see us in the top 10 within the next few months. Now, like I said, a big part of that is attracting capital into the ecosystem for all of our builders out there, but it's also about earned media. Anybody that followed the presidential election this past cycle realizes how important earned media is. And the difference between earned and paid media is pretty simple. Earned media is when people just want to talk about your product, want to talk about what's being built in the Hedera ecosystem, compared to just paying somebody to go out there and talk about your product. In our case, talking about all the fantastic things that are being built on the Hedera network, or the HBAR more specifically. And we're seeing a lot more traction around this lately, now that we're outperforming just a little bit. One great example of this is Kevin O'Leary, who I know holds some HBAR, was on Fox Business, and he was touting HBAR as he was talking about the entire booming crypto market. So let's take a look at a quick clip.
Mr. Wonderful, otherwise known as Kevin O'Leary, joins me now. Kevin, looks to me like this is the Trump Bitcoin rally. Are you buying more or are you selling some?
I'm in a dilemma, Stuart. This move is almost unprecedented in how fast it's occurred, but it's not just Bitcoin. You've got some of the blockchain technologies that were just left aside for so long that have exploded to the upside. HBAR it went up 40, 50, 60% this week in anticipation of policy coming out of both the SEC and the CFTC. Institutions are talking about these technologies now in a way that they didn't because they never thought they'd come to fruition. And so the whole crypto community is trying to figure out what's next. We think Bitcoin is the granddaddy of allocation to sovereign wealth. And, we're anticipating the SEC to put some rules out on this right after Trump takes over. So you've got a tremendous amount of demand here. Now, the challenge is most institutions have some regulatory boundaries. For example, no more than 5% in any one position or 21 or 20% in any one sector. And we're breaching those left and right 24/7 because we're having massive moves. And so the compliance departments are squeezing managers' heads every day trying to figure this out.
It's fascinating, but by the sound of it, you think it's going higher still, up and beyond 102,
Yes.
103,000. That's what it sounds like.
I don't think right now the charts have no resistance, so it's anybody's guess.
And of course, it's not just Mr. Wonderful. It's a lot of other influencers out there that are jumping on the bandwagon as well. As soon as they go out there and buy a little bit of HBAR, then they're going to become evangelical about it as well. As an example, Ansem, and he has over 600,000 followers. And then he put out individual polls for 15 chains that had the most engagement on that first initial post. Now, Zep pointed out that Solana is leading in terms of vote percent in favor of on-chain users, but the HBAR poll had 35,000 more views than the next highest poll. And Zep's conclusion, not surprisingly, was not to fade Hedera. And then we have Coin Bureau, who hasn't always been the biggest fan of Hedera, is starting to get on board as well. That team has been highlighting it in their podcast. Now, they have blocked me from engaging in their posts, but they did highlight that HBAR was the best performing asset a couple weeks ago. And it's not just engagement on these really large accounts either. We have Will from one of our favorite NFT projects, Dead Pixels Ghost Club, and he put out a joke that a lot of people fell for, saying that HBAR will be the best performing meme coin of this cycle. He was acting like he's an aspiring influencer, saying to follow him for more meme coin alpha. And of course, this was a joke, but he got really good engagement on that post with over 250,000 views. We had another HBAR Bair Hangry 444% who did a comparison between XRP and HBAR. I think this is a really good comparison to make, and he made some fantastic points and got nearly 2,000 likes on that post for his efforts. And coming back around to the large accounts, we have Merlin the Trader, who has about 380,000 followers, highlighting the soon-to-launch lending platform out of Italy, Serio. He said, huge news for HBAR, Serio Finance, a lending and borrowing protocol using AI for liquidation event prevention, is launching on Hedera. And while we're talking about lending and borrowing, we had the first launch of a general purpose lending and borrowing platform this week with Bonzo Finance. They have a good cross section of assets that you can lend and borrow, including HBAR, HBAR-X, USDC, Sauce, XSauce, Karate, Steam, PAC, Dovu, and HST. And here on this chart, they're showing the total supply of each one of those assets, the utilization rate, or how much is actually being borrowed, what kind of yield you're getting for supplying those assets, and then how much it's going to cost you to borrow them. I'm sure we're going to have a lot more information on that Bonzo launch. We're going to welcome Brady back here in a couple days on Sunday for another DeFi Corner. I've already used the platform both for lending and borrowing. Really smooth platform. It's going great so far. But again, we're going to have some more information on that on Sunday. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is the launch of MemeJob.fund. It should have launched just a few hours before I post this, and I could certainly talk about it, but I got an A team to come on and discuss it. We have Tudor from Headstarter. We also have Zepsy, who's really big into the meme coin space, and then we have Jack from Kabila. So let's check it out. So today we're going to be jumping into meme coins. During the bear market, I realized kind of what meme coins are. It's a way for community members to get skin in the game, put a little bit of money in, and get involved with a community. And once you have that skin in the game, you're that much more engaged. Now, I understand that meme coins don't resonate with everybody, but I don't want to give an inch to these other networks. I want Hedera to be competitive on every single front, to give this network that we know has so much potential every chance it has to reach that success. Now, we're going to jump into it with some people that are really focused on meme coins, at least right now. Zep, you've recognized the potential of meme coins and the impact that they can have on networks for a long time. Can you just tell us a little bit about your thought process?
Yeah, I mean, meme coins, they've been around since like 2017 or something. You saw the Doges, and then you saw the Shibs, and then you saw the Pepes, and all that have followed in more recent years. And when they first came out, they were just a joke, right? They were just like, okay, we live in a token economy now in Web3. How can I be a part of that? How can I commodify attention and turn it into a token? So those first ones did very well, but they were still sort of treated as jokes, that they were the negative part of Web3 almost. But in more recent years, the end of last cycle and definitely in this cycle, these coins have really taken to the forefront of Web3. You look at teams like Solana, who've built entire retail empires off the back of these coins. You look at Pump.fun, which was making more revenue in 24 hours than the entire Ethereum network. And you go, wow, okay, this is no longer a joke. This is a viable product that can really generate revenue for a network. But even beyond just the sort of direct revenue it can bring through, protocols like Pump.fun or, upcoming MemeJob, there is ways that people are actually activating their own product launches. So you look at Solana, you saw their Saga phone drop, right? It was the first time a layer one or any network in crypto had decided to launch hardware really beyond, a cold wallet, a physical phone designed specifically for Web3 interaction. When it first launched, it really sort of fell flat. They had some really hardcore Solana maxis that are like, okay, this is cool, I'll buy it. But on the whole, it's like $499. People don't want to switch from iOS or Android to a new piece of hardware. And then I think it was in the sort of the second sort of quarter of that phone existing, they then airdropped Bonk, which was this meme coin that had emerged on Solana. And all of the users on that phone suddenly had this meme coin, which actually 10x'd the value of the phone and original cost. So you went on eBay and you're seeing people selling Saga phones with Bonk on it for like $3,999 on the expectation that these meme coins would continue to airdrop, which they have. And so it went from a relatively flat launch of a product to suddenly being one of the most hyped pieces of hardware that we'd seen in Web3. And that was entirely off the prospect of future meme coin drops. That was amazing to see, right? It showed that, real layer ones with serious money behind them, with serious venture capital behind them, are leaning into meme coins, not just as a gimmick, but as a way to really launch products. And we've then seen that again actually last week with the Solana Play, which is their new sort of console, like handheld console, and they're going to be launching an airdrop with GigaChad, which is another meme coin on Solana. So there's been this evolution of a joke to, oh, this is interesting, to, holy, this can actually ship our products. And if the largest alt L1 to Ethereum in terms of market capitalization is doing that, then there's obviously a clear strategy there that meme coins are part of. So in short, meme coins, I believe, are definitely here to stay in Web3. Yes, they'll fluctuate. Yes, they'll have highs and lows, but they really are, I think, now a part of that, Web3 ecosystem, 100%.
And whatever Solana can do, we can do better. So we're going to go over to Tutor. Now, Tutor, we have meme coins already in the Hedera ecosystem. Some of them have been pretty successful. I certainly love Grelf. I hold some of that. But we're going to get a launch pad here soon. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. So there are indeed a few meme coins on Hedera. We all vibe with them. We identify with a lot of them. And this is, like, as Zepsi said, one of the core concepts about meme coins. The launchpad, where you will be able to instantaneously create and get your token, fungible token, to trade, is called MemeJob. And it, depending on when this video airs, it will either be live or imminently live. And what is so interesting about it is that meme coins can evolve from being just a meme, just something for laughs, just something that is driven by a certain event or a social movement, to becoming products. Because one of the core concepts of a meme coin is that is community driven and community led. The community oftentimes takes over the project and leads its development and its evolution. And I saw actually the other day on Hedera that somebody was jokingly saying on X that Hedera is the best performing meme coin in Web3, right? And some people felt some way about it. But at least in certain ways, although we know that Hedera is a utility cryptocurrency of a DLT network, in the essence, it shares some of the core traits of a meme coin. The community focus is there. A lot of the community are driving the most important use cases in that ecosystem. And it instills FOMO, as we saw in the last few months. It has a very strong identity, and it really rallies behind, I think, the transformative tech and a strong vision that was instilled by its founders, right? First and foremost, though, we have a vibrant and passionate community that call themselves HBARbarians. It's very core to their identity and persona online, and everybody has a feeling of belonging in this small chamber of ours. And I think we have the ability through meme coins to attract a lot more participants in our ecosystem. And I think that the reason why MemeJob will be very successful is because we have this passionate group, a critical mass, I guess, of passionate HBARbarians that will really be loud and try to grow the successes of the network. Hedera, when you compare MemeJob to Pump Fun or some of the incumbents, it has a lot of benefits technologically by being built on Hedera. And we believe that it should attract a lot of retail participants from other ecosystems as well, right? Not only will you be able to create your own fungible token and have it instantaneously tradable with $1, but also the transaction fees are very low. And at the same time, the time to consensus is very competitive in the Web3 space. Not to mention that Hedera, you don't have any MEV or minor extractable value, right? So you know that all your transactions, while in the trading phase, while the token is on the bonding curve, while there's a high demand for the token on the DEX, you know that you're going to have fair ordering for that token. So I see that as a unique value proposition that Hedera offers to all the people that love internet culture and vibe behind different memes or different movements in the form of a fungible token.
Well said and well covered. Now, Jack, I'm going to jump over to you. You've already had some experience with creating a meme coin. You have Candy that's already out there, and you're a pretty big fan of a pretty anticipated token that's going to be launching soon. They've been doing an awful lot of footwork already on X. Can you just tell us a little bit about your experience so far and what we have to look forward to?
Yeah, with pleasure. So many ideas popping off in my head as well, just listening to Tudor and Zepsi. Like, meme coins really are fireworks. I think they have many different levels, but they have that simplicity and they attract attention and liquidity, right? Which I think, it's that top of the funnel marketing where communities are coming together, tokenizing their ideas and rallying behind them. And that is just going to attract so much excitement, I think. We've seen it with meme coins on Hedera. From my experience, I've seen it with Candy. Candy, I think, is a good example of a meme coin that's not necessarily the typical meme coin. I think meme coins are going to become an umbrella. I think they already are. And really, you're just tokenizing the idea. Could be a joke, could be a degen meme that's been around for years. It could be something new. It could be a character. It could be a story. It could be whatever the human brain can come up with and tokenize and get people to rally behind. I think, the sky's the limit, like we saw with Bonk on Solana. And you could take a simple idea and end up building an empire of physical products and, stuff from internationally around the world, right, through this technology. So a few things that I wrote down there: attention, liquidity, simplicity. I think there'll be a meme coin for everyone. The Roy Dino coin, I think, is a great example, kind of targeting boomers, potentially people that haven't necessarily been into meme coins up until now, or maybe they've started dabbling. But I think, we're seeing an example there of a different angle, a different approach that could potentially tap into new markets, to new kind of age groups. And I was saying the other day with someone that, just like when TikTok started and we had that initial phase of, that's just, for kids, that's just silly. That's just people dancing on their screens. Now our parents are on there, our grandparents are doing these TikTok dances and videos, right? And it's becoming like the most ridiculous place for media, advertising, selling products. It's become a world in and of itself, right? And I think we're going to see that with meme coins. And that's what gets me so excited for MemeJob, for, tokens that are really curated, as we're seeing with the Dino. Like, there's a lot of original art. Projects like that are going to set the bar for the quality that we want to see on Hedera, right? And that is going to attract a lot of fresh eyeballs, fresh attention, fresh liquidity. Could be more excited for it.
Well, like I said, whatever these other networks could do, we could do better. And that comes to the art, that comes to the tech and everything else. But guys, you pretty much covered everything that I wanted to touch on today. But I wanted to give you an opportunity, if you have any final thoughts, to let us know. Zeb, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I liked obviously what everyone said, but Tudor mentioned the sort of velocity of the community we already have in terms of how large it is, really, but also how active, how close it is, how excited about the future of Hedera it is. And that really differentiates us from a lot of new networks. And I was sort of entertaining this idea the other day that, being called a Dino coin is actually the most endearing part of that is the fact that it basically means we have a very large community, right? We've had a community that's been around since 2018. that has been through the bear markets, that has been in the trenches, that has gone through all the shit together, and is now turbo excited about going through the good times together. So we've managed to have a very active community through the depths of the bear. And we're now seeing, HBAR Barians of 300, 400 followers getting 2,000 likes on a post, The excitement is coming back. And that strength of our community, I think, is exactly what will help the launch of a platform like this. Yes, we've always had a slightly different demographic in terms of like degens versus more classical investors. But I really think that shift is starting to happen with platforms like MemeJob, and with former meme coins like Grelf and DeFi and SourceSwap, Bonzo, etc. And I really think that is the key here, is that we aren't launching on a new shiny coin with bots and bots and bots. We're launching on a serious community that has all the energy for something new. And I think, just super excited to have everyone focusing on that together. And I think that's going to give us the biggest head start out of that door for sure.
I'm excited as well. Tudor, do you have anything?
Yeah, I definitely resonate with everything Zepsi and Jack mentioned, specifically about the strength of our community. It's been a community that has been growing for, 6-7 years now, right? Has been mesmerized by the potential of the technology. And more importantly, without, huge VC money over the past 2.5 years, since DeFi is feasible on Hedera, community has backed all the ecosystem projects from the ground up, right? Very little institutional money, right? So this speaks volumes about where we are and the strength that we carry. And most importantly, I think that with the advent of MemeJob soon, and we have the opportunity to boost and to speed run through our growth phase so that we can become competitive with most of the other layer ones when it comes to on-chain liquidity, volumes, and on-chain, participants.
Well, Tudor, thanks for your tireless support and your endless building on the Hedera network. Jack, we're going to give you the final word.
All right. Which of the 100 ideas shall I pick to talk about? So I think I just love to encourage both creators, from Hedera, from the community, or even, maybe just new to Hedera coming in, and also, the OG meme coins, everyone who's been building for the last few years, the new people coming in, creators that have maybe been on the fence of maybe playing around with the tech and doing something a little bit more experimental, whether it be with NFTs, tokens, meme coins. Like, it doesn't have to be something it doesn't have to be a full-blown project. It doesn't have to be something serious, even though I'd encourage you to take it seriously. But it could be just a fun, simple experiment. I think a meme coin platform like MemeJob could be a great place to start dabbling and having fun. Obviously, there's there's money tied to these tokens. So this is not financial advice, but I encourage creativity, right? I think it's an opportunity to incubate new ideas on Hedera. And I just encourage everyone to take the plunge and support those who are taking that plunge, right? Because it does take some courage to learn and do this kind of stuff and build. So yeah, just a shout out to everyone ahead of this launch. Excited.
Great note to leave on. Guys, thank you again for all the hard work you put into this space, and good luck with all your projects. So if you are into the meme coin scene, go ahead and play around with memejob.fun, because things are really going to start to heat up. We have Dino that's going to be launching, I believe, in a few days. So you want to be familiar with that system and how it all works before we get to what seems like one of the most anticipated token launches on Hedera in general. All right, so next thing I want to touch on is one of the teams that we just talked about there, Kabila and Jack. He has that candy meme coin, but around that, he's doing a giveaway on Christmas. He's going to be giving away 830 Christmas stockings. Apparently, they are going to be packed with different HTS tokens, NFTs, things like that. Different builders, platforms, and influencers in the space are getting those whitelists to give away. And yes, I do have 5 of them. So if you reply to the X post for this video with your account number, the first 5 entries are going to get those whitelist spots. Since it's all whitelist, they're all free. The launch pad is going to be on Kabila. and it's going to be taking place on Christmas Day for 24 hours. And speaking of the Kabila team, their native token launched this week. They already have a market cap of $2.8 million. The total TVL is at $672,000. This is from a couple days ago, so unique holders is already over 1,000 people or 1,000 accounts. And that first day after launch, they had $1.2 million in trading volume. So a huge congratulations for Manu, Jack, and the rest of the Kabila team. The next thing I want to get into is Karate Combat 51. That's going to be down in Miami, as I mentioned. I'm going to be down there, and the place for anybody who is not live at the event is going to be KC Social. We're going to be running polls, we're going to be running giveaways, and I'm going to be posting exclusive content leading up to and during the event, so check it out. And if you're going to be down there at the event, reach out to me because there's going to be a lot of fun things going on there live. All right, so we're going to shift gears here a little bit to the technical roadmap for Hedera. I caught up with Richard Bair, and he is at Hashgraph, and he is also working with Hyro, and he ran through some of the features that are going to be coming to the Hedera network, but also talked about how unique Hedera is. So let's take a look. Richard, welcome. Thanks for hopping on today.
Hey, thanks. I'm glad to be here. Haven't been on your show before.
I know. It's been too long. We should have gotten you on a lot sooner. But Richard, to kick this off, can you tell us about Hyro? You have a pretty important place there at that new organization, and how things have changed for Hedera since its launch.
Yeah, you bet. So Hyro is a really important step along the path for us. You know, one of the things that we have obviously talked about for years has been the open sourcing of Hedera. All of our code was open sourced. It was on GitHub. But a lot of people didn't recognize it as such because of the sort of organizational support and structure around, the open source foundation. There wasn't any sort of foundation. It was just some open source projects. And so we felt that we needed to find a good governance structure for the code itself. And we looked at a bunch of different options, and we ended up settling on the Linux Foundation. And they were, excited to have us participate as part of their new LFDT project, and we were excited to participate in it. It gives us access to a lot more developers. They have a massive distribution list. We have a bunch of projects that we are scheduling in the new year. I think we have some workshops and things like that scheduled in February. So we're going to have opportunities to reach out to a large number of developers, most of whom have never done anything in Web3 before. So that's one of the things that we're really excited about inside the Linux Foundation, is having an opportunity to be part of that larger ecosystem.
It's the big tent mentality. Bring as many people in as
Absolutely.
we can. Of course, there's growing amount of Web3 developers out there, but the pool of Web2 developers is much more broad, right?
Oh, yeah. And I think we've had opportunities where we've gone to different developer conferences and spoken and asked the question, how many people in this room have done Web3? And maybe you'd get about 3 or 4% of the room that had really done it, and most of the people had not. So I think that the sort of things that we're developing will appeal to them. I think the immutability of a ledger is important from a regulatory perspective for different people and different use cases that they have. I think the real world asset tokenization story, makes a lot of sense. I think that the sort of proof of action, where you do a thing and you can take a hash of your thing and stick it on the network, and then you can prove later, as an auditing means what's done. I think there's a lot of use cases, even outside finance, where this is going to be something that's important to Web2 developers. They just maybe don't even know it yet because we haven't really reached out to that. So we're looking forward to that.
One thing that it seems like Hedera has done, when we started off, of course, the Hashgraph algorithm was patented. Then we went to open source a few years ago. And now it seems like we've gone to this completely other level that even a lot of other open source networks that have been open source from the very beginning, they haven't even gone to this level. Have we kind of leapfrogged some of our competitors when it comes to open source?
Yeah, I think so. I think that the fact that we were the first major L1 that went open source inside, Linux Foundation or some large foundation is actually a big statement of our commitment to doing this the right way, to real open source development. And you talk about the Hashgraph consensus, right? To me, the thing that I like so much about the Hashgraph algorithm is that it's democratic. It is not leader based. It is every participant in that network are together seeing every transaction. They're voting on the order in which it happened, virtually voting on the order and consensus. That is so unique in the way that we do this. And when you think about the sort of ethos behind distributed ledgers and blockchains, the ethos of Web3, like, it doesn't get better than a democratic approach where there is no leader and everybody gets to participate. That's also true in terms of our governance. It's not just a small handful of people who govern this network. It's the governing council, and they all have votes and rules and things like that. It's very democratic at that level, but also in the way that we manage our source code, that it's democratic there too. It's a meritocracy. You come, anybody who comes, anybody who participates has an equal seat at the table with everybody else. And that goes from the way that we structured and defined the technical steering committee, that you cannot have any more than 2 members of the same company on the technical steering committee, so that it sort of forces a broader participation, number of people who can come and participate as part of that group and really get involved. It was all designed to be, to decentralize the decision making and make it something that is open and free to everybody, and everybody has an equal voice.
Richard, I want to go back to something that you mentioned from a practical standpoint. You mentioned that, Hedera is leaderless, and I know there's a lot of practical benefits that come from that, you don't have to worry about MEV or front running. Can you go through some of the benefits of being a leaderless network? It's pretty unique in the space. I know there might be a few others out there, but I don't hear about too many. Yeah,
it really is fairly unique. I mean, from a philosophical perspective, as I mentioned, the thing that I really like about it is just that it hits right. It's not an opportunity for anybody to say I was the leader and I made some unilateral decision and everybody else just has to accept it and move on. And it allows every participant in the network to be involved. That eliminates certain classes of, let's say, misbehavior on the network. Like I said, front running or MEV. No one node gets to choose the order of transactions that the whole network is going to participate in. And a user, even if there was one node who wanted to misbehave, a user can always send their transactions to multiple nodes in the network. And then, you just needed one of those to be honest. And if any one of them is honest, then it will come to, consensus despite any sort of bad actions of any particular node. So every decision along the way in terms of how the hashgraph was constructed, how we constructed the nodes, was to make it so that the user was in charge and that there was no opportunity for a malicious actor to be able to take advantage of that user in any way. The method by which we select the order of transactions is based on the median time of that transaction being distributed through the network. So it's literally as fair as you could ever design one of these systems to be. And it also it's one of the reasons why we're also fast. It sort of paradoxically, everybody would say, oh, it's easy to be fast if you have a centralized decision point. That's true. If I had a single leader who decided everything, then that one single leader could, make decisions very quickly. But you get a network like Bitcoin or Ethereum, and they're like, well, yes, it's leader based, but we rotate who the leader is, and it's not known ahead of time who the leader is going to be. We sort of figure it out after the fact. And but there's a surprising result of that particular consensus approach, which is that the network must be slow by design. Bitcoin has to be slow, or else it would fork infinitely. I mean, it'd have all these branches all over the place. Every node in the network would claim it was the leader, and then trying to settle on who it was wouldn't work. It has to, by design, be slow. And that's the thing that's really revolutionary about Hashgraph is not only does it eliminate a leader-based system, but its performance is on par with the leader-based system. And that is extraordinary. And it's not something that just anybody can do.
Well, thanks for putting some more meat on that leaderless bone for us. It's something that I know we talk about a lot, but really understanding the ins and outs is important. So the next thing I want to touch on is Hyro is going to be kind of responsible for how the Hashgraph algorithm evolves over time. But still, as far as Hedera, it's going to have to get approval. The changes and features are going to need to get approval, if I understand it correctly, by the governing council before it actually gets implemented. Can you talk about that process and maybe some of the new features that are coming in the new year?
Yeah, you bet. So essentially the way that it works is that the technical steering committee on the Linux Foundation project on Hyro is responsible for approving the different HIPs or features that can, will go into the code base. And Hedera is responsible for accepting those features onto the network. So what this means is, let's say, for example, one of the new features that we're working on is batch transactions. We develop a HIP like normal, just like we've been doing it for the last several years. That HIP will be taken to the technical steering committee to review. The technical steering committee will look at it and they'll say, okay, is this HIP something that makes this project better? What requirements does this put on all the individual sub-projects of Hyro? So we have like a mirror node, and we have a consensus node, and we have a mirror node explorer, and we have SDKs, and all these different projects that are all part of Hyro. What does this HIP mean for them? So it's essentially, the technical steering committee is essentially coordinating the activities of all of the sub-projects so that we can work together in a harmonious way. So that's what we do on the technical steering committee. We will approve one of these HIPs. But it may be that we implement batch transactions and the council's like, well, that's great, but we actually don't want that feature on our network for some reason. If that were the case, then what we would do is just implement our feature flags. And when it gets deployed on the Hedera network, it'll be disabled. So Hyro and Hedera are both partners. It's not a hierarchy in this case. It's partners. Lehman mentioned spheres when he was on the Foundry call the other day. And that could be a scenario where somebody has their own private Hyro network that they want to add some features to that wouldn't be on the Hedera public ledger. And then we would have to get some interledger communication going between those two pieces and things like that. So we could end up getting ourselves into a future here where it would actually be a very positive thing that we're able to develop things and deploy in some places and deploy differently in the Hedera mainnet. Could be a very good thing.
And again, just going back, what are some of the features that are going to be coming out that you're most excited about?
Yeah, so actually, batch transactions is one of them that I think is going to go through the whole gamut here. I think that was going to be very successful. So essentially, what a batch transaction is it's the ability to submit a transaction that's made up of multiple sub transactions. It all succeeds or fails as a single atomic unit. An example of this, we've had customers who have been interested in doing things like unfreeze a token, do a transfer, and then refreeze a token, things like this. So batch transactions enable some new utilization there. It's important for real world assets where you actually do have legal reasons why you're freezing and unfreezing tokens before they're transferred and so forth. So batch transactions is one. Another one that we've actually had for a long time is long-term scheduled transactions. So our scheduled transactions today can be scheduled about up to a half hour ahead of time, but we would like to have a mechanism for scheduling them long-term in that you could schedule something that's going to be executed, let's say every quarter over the next 5 years or something like that. You can schedule those up front. Another one that I'm really interested in is what we call jumbo Ethereum transactions. Our transactions are limited to 6 kilobytes in size. But on the EVM, oftentimes people use much larger transactions, and they can go as high as 128 kilobytes in size. And so we would like to be able to support those too to help make our system, again, equivalent with other EVM networks, make it easier for developers to come over. And also, there are various applications deployed on our network today that would be happy to be able to go with larger than 6 kilobytes in size for some of these calls. Another thing that we're working on along that same vein with EVM is really good integration with Hardhat and Forge. So if you're an Ethereum developer, you're probably using either Forge or Hardhat for doing the testing of your smart contracts. They have a feature that's called forking. And the way that it works is that they run sort of a local EVM. And then it's kind of like a local cache of another EVM, like maybe mainnet. So you could deploy your test code, you can execute your test code, and if it has a dependency on another smart contract, then it goes and downloads that smart contract from the mainnet, installs it locally, and then executes. And if it has dependency on different state, it goes to the main network and gets that state, then caches it locally, and then continues to execute. And what this allows you to do is you could write, like, let's say I wrote a smart contract and I was dependent on Saucer Swap. Well, I don't have to install Saucer Swap locally in my testing. I don't have to go copy all of their state down from mainnet in order to do my testing. I can just write my code and execute it, and whatever it depends on from Saucer Swap, I can go get it from testnet or mainnet or whatever network I want. It's a really, really great feature, and for EVM developers, it's a normal thing that they get to make use of. And in fact, we do have support for that for sort of pure EVMs applications, but we're extending it so that we have great support also for HTS tokens. If your smart contract is dependent on an HTS token, then you'll be able to write your smart contract to depend on those tokens without having to do any sort of additional stuff. It'll just work. So that's really cool. And I think sort of philosophically, what we were trying to achieve is that we want Hedera to be the best network for EVM developers. We don't want it to be like, oh, I'm going to deploy to Hedera, so now I have to figure out how I'm going to do it. We want it to be why would I ever use anything other than Hedera? This is the best network to develop for. So that developer experience is something that we're really, really going to put a lot of emphasis on in this coming year. And to that extent, anybody who is an EVM developer out there, we want to engage you. We've gone to ETH Denver, I think the last 3-4 years. We're going to be there again this year. I'll be there this year. And we really, really, really want to nail that and make it the best experience for developers. Then there's a whole bunch of other little features, block streams, little features. Block streams is actually one of the most consequential things that we've done in a long time. That's worth a whole statement on its own. State proofs, performance, scalability, long list of stuff.
So certainly that should be the goal. It seems like there's a lot of good things that are coming. You mentioned, batching transactions. We talked a little bit about spheres, and I know that state proofs are going to be necessary to have sharding. So we're talking about things that are going to allow Hedera and the ecosystem to scale significantly. I want to see if you have any input on that and let us know how we're doing on that front, but also maybe touch on how we're addressing, because these things making overall the transactions more efficient are also going to cut down on the fees. So how can we ensure that we're sustainable from a revenue standpoint, while at the same time making sure that we have the scaling to meet all of our users' needs?
Yeah. When we look at scalability, there's two axes that we look at. One is vertical scalability, one is horizontal. So in vertical scalability, we're talking about taking a single piece of hardware and make it do more and more and more. And we actually still have a lot of room left to extend our ability on to go vertical scale. So for example, we have, I think in the last year, more than 10x the number of entities that we can store on our system, for example. It's kind of like a quiet upgrade nobody knew about, but it's like a very large number of entities that you can create on the system. And we could do another 10x from here. So there's, our goal is to be able to support all the accounts or all the people on Earth should be able to deploy it without even having to get to the point where we're doing, sharding. We should just be able to support that on a single shard. It's also on the TPS level. There's, obviously, 10K is a big number. There's a lot of use cases that you can pack into 10K. And actually, we are looking at a new feature called dynamic throttles that would change the way the throttling system works in such a way that transactions wouldn't be sort of artificially throttled, but they'd be able to achieve whatever their natural performances based on performance characteristics of the network. Those sorts of things, that sort of vertical scalability is one of those things that we're really working on. But we're also looking at horizontal scalability, which is sharding being the term that we've used historically to represent this idea of being able to stamp out multiple sub-networks, if you will, that all sort of contribute to the Hedera mainnet. But there's another variation on that, which is what Lehman was talking about the other day on hash spheres. And the idea is that in many cases, people want to have a separate network, maybe not from a scalability perspective, maybe it's from privacy perspective. Like if you're a regulated financial product, you might have to run your own network, but you still want that interoperability with the main network. Actually, the reasons for that are pretty obvious. You look at how important it is for us, example, to have USDC, so significant USDC liquidity on the Hedera network itself. Well, each one of these private networks also needs to have liquidity of various different tokens. Maybe it's USDC or some other token. And for them to get their own bridges, to get wired into, let's say, centralized exchanges and things like that, it's never going to happen, right? It's so hard that if we had thousands of these private networks, they're never going to be able to get all of that themselves. So they all need to be plugged into the L1. And the L1 is plugged into all these centralized exchanges and has all the liquidity and everything else. If you looked in the sort of private network space, there's been one since the get-go, really, of blockchain, and it has always been disconnected from a public network. And this was a real problem. Customers would set up these private networks and they would start doing their stuff and they'd say, okay, this is great. Now I need to do interledger interoperability and I need a public L1. And they just weren't designed for that. And so a lot of those projects suffered as a consequence of that. So what we want to do, one of the solutions that we're looking at for horizontal scalability is this idea that there are many people who need to have a private network, but they also want to plug into the main network. And those private networks, they give you that, and I say private network, it doesn't actually have to be private. It could be public, it could be private, it could be hybrid, anybody, it's just another deployment. It's another network. And it goes back to that vision that Lehman had at the very beginning. Lehman and Vance were talking about, shared worlds, which is, of course, where worlds came from. And those shared worlds was this idea that there could be lots of these little things and they all collaborate together. And that raises the value of the L1, of the public ledger. That is it's just like in the networking world. You've got the internet, which is networking of lots of little networks that are all going over some common protocol. Same idea. We have a common protocol, which is the L1, and then we have lots of little networks that people are storing the bits and pieces in. And so that whole idea is really resonating with a lot of people. Now, technically, the challenge here is if I have these different ledgers, how do we transmit trust from one to the other? And this is where state proofs come in. You need to have a way to be able to prove that the state that you have on one network is true when you're passing that state to another network. So you can imagine, for example, that if we were moving USDC liquidity from mainnet to a private network, guess what? We need to have some proof that we send to that private network saying, yes, the account that's trying to send you these tokens can send you these tokens. I certified it. I moved them into escrow or whatever, it's ready to go. Then the private network would be able to accept it, send a proof back to the public network saying, all right, I got you, and I have minted that many USDC tokens on my side. And then the other side can say, okay, great, I can go ahead and burn these on the mainnet. You have to have this sort of a protocol for transferring value from one to the other, and that requires state proofs. And state proofs aren't new. We've been talking about it for a long time. It's one of those things that Lehman sort of forecasted out maybe 6-8 years ago, maybe longer. He was like, yeah, well, then we'll have state proofs. Well, now we're implementing it. And so this will be the year that all those pieces sort of come to fruition. So we'll have the ability to generate state proofs. We'll have the ability to transfer value between two different networks. So the mainnet benefits from network effects. If you looked at like Facebook, what was it that kept everybody going to Facebook? It was the network effect, the fact that everybody was there. The same thing is going to be true for the L1. Because the L1 is sort of the central hub that all these other networks are participating in, that's where the network effect is. That's where you're going to find all the great liquidity. That's where you're going to find all the real DEX operations going on. It's where you're going to find all the interactivity between everybody, because it's in the L1 that you have the lowest latency between those transactions. There's a higher latency once you start talking to other networks. So it's really going to be, as much additional work is done on other spheres and contributes back to the L1, just raises the value of the L1. It doesn't diminish it at all. And the L1, meanwhile, is really where everybody's going to want to be, because that's where all of the network effects are going to be.
That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Richard, you've given us so much information already. Is there anything else you'd like to touch on before we let you go?
So I did talk a little bit about the block streams, and people have asked us, what is the block stream? How does this fit into the whole system? It's another step along the way in decentralization. Today, we store our blockchain history on Amazon and Google buckets, public buckets that anybody can access. But those public buckets are expensive for people to access, and it's still not very satisfying because we have these two providers that are holding that blockchain history. And so block streams and block nodes are two things that we've been working on and designed for over a year, I think, and are being implemented and will be released in this coming year. It's going to allow anybody in the world to run a block node, to host these blockstream data, to serve it up to other people. And the council will be doing this as well, of course. And so we're going to get really great decentralization on our blockchain history, and also some way for more participation. And it's also going to reduce the cost for access to that blockstream history. So today, if you want to run a mirror node, you have to basically pay Google and Amazon by reading from their public buckets in order to get all the data that you need in order to populate your mirror node. But with block nodes, it'll be a much less expensive mechanism for being able to get the data that you want, and actually to bring your mirror node up in a lightweight way. Mirror nodes were always intended to be a participatory thing. People look at Hedera and they think, oh, you guys are a private permission network, and so you're not decentralized or whatever. But when if you looked at the architecture, there's the consensus part, there's the execution part that takes the transactions that came to consensus, executes them, and transitions the state. Then you have those things produce a blockchain, and then you have a mirror node that consumes the blockchain. And we always wanted the mirror node to be something that could be broadly executed. Anybody would be able to set up a mirror node. Even for your own dApp, it would be really easy. You just deploy a mirror node. It filters out all the other nonsense, just listens to the things that you cared about. That was always the vision. The problem was that the way that the block information was being stored on Amazon and Google, it was just too expensive to run one of those mirror nodes. So actually, when we started this whole journey on block nodes, what we were really trying to solve were two problems. One was, how do we make mirror nodes less expensive to operate? And the second one was, how do we increase the decentralization of our blockchain history? And as we went down this path, we found so many things that we were going to be able to solve with this, with the solution that we came up with, including state proofs. It was going to enable a broad range of different things that we could do with interledger communication, the spheres, everything else is really dependent on these block streams and block nodes. The idea was that it also offloads a lot of work that would otherwise have to be on consensus nodes, moves them to these block nodes, which means that the consensus nodes could spend all of their time and energy coming to consensus and executing transactions. So they're a really, really powerful concept, and it's going to be totally available to people to be able to participate in. Obviously, it's all being developed open source right now, but even in deployment, there's sort of we have a multi-phase deployment strategy for them, so that, as you can imagine, we want to be very careful so that we don't harm mainnet under any circumstance. So there's like a very careful, release path for these things. That's what we're going to achieve in the end, is that anybody will be able to run a block node, and anybody will be able to keep either the full history or partial history. And for your own dApp, you'd be able to deploy one of these things or a mirror node and have a really low cost way of being able to get access to the information. We're hoping to open up the participatory gates and allow a lot more people to be able to deploy these things.
Great to hear. I know there's been some issues around mirror nodes and accessibility and all that kind of stuff. So it's great to hear that you're going to be broadening that. Richard, thank you so much for hopping on here today and all the work that you're doing in there at Hedera.
All right. Thanks, Brandon. It's great to be here.
And now we're going to jump right into Sharkbites. I will say that they're getting pretty long, so we're going to start to do them in a little bit different way. We're going to do a few questions here initially in the weekly update, but then we're going to post the entire thing on Mondays as its own separate video. It certainly deserves its own video, but I like to have Sharkbites here because I want to make sure as many people are coming here as possible. And of course, Rob is a huge draw, and I get to pull everybody through everything else that's going on in the Hedera ecosystem to get to Rob answering your questions. But once again, we are going to be posting some of the questions here in the weekly update, but we're also going to be posting it independently. But without further ado, let's take a look at it. Rob, welcome back. It's going really well again in the Hedera space.
Another great week, a bit choppier than the previous one, but it's always good to be an HBAR bearer.
Hey, when it comes to markets, you need these pullbacks. You need to set up that support so we can go for the next leg up. So this is really healthy, this pullback. I know you don't generally talk about markets, but it's good to see these pullbacks. Even on the pullbacks, it seems like HBAR is outperforming a lot of our competition out there. So I'm happy with what I'm seeing.
Yeah, where we sat today while we're recording, we're still at number 17 in CMC. If you rate that as a good assessment of Hedera's performance, then I think we're in a good place.
I do. That's the scoreboard I pay attention to. Yeah. But Rob, we have a fair amount of questions here today. We're going to have to go a little bit rapid fire because we already have tons of content going on this week, but we'll jump into them. So the first one comes from HBAR $10, who says, Rob, Hedera has very cheap fees, but do enterprises still feel the public mainnet is too expensive for large-scale use cases that will be doing tens of billions of transactions?
It's a really good question, especially in the light of the use case around Atma. I suspect that was the thing that kind of triggered the question. Ultimately, when you're running a business, it's the commerciality of the service or product you're offering that you need to focus on. And so the operating costs of building and operating that service or that product is everything to the business. It's revenue and margin. So although the question suggests that, at high scale, it still might be too costly to operate these high volume use cases on Hedera. I mean, it's simply not the case. That just means that the product market fit hadn't been found. And so, as long as there's margin, as long as the commercials are correct, the commercial modeling is correct, then there's no reason to think that billions of transactions wouldn't be commercially viable. Equally, if you get that wrong, if you get your commerciality wrong, your pricing wrong, the product market fit it simply isn't there, then it doesn't matter whether you're doing billions or tens of transactions a second. You're not going to be a successful business. So what Hedera offers is a platform that allows for huge scale, but the solutions that built on it, you still have to go back to core principles of business building and operating, just with the additional benefit of having this amazing platform underneath you.
Now, Rob, just to put a finer point on that, when you say the commercial viability, if you have a use case that's doing transactions and they're paying either 1/100th of a cent or 1/10th of a cent, depending on what service they're using, as long as they're making a percentage above that, they're getting that much more value out of it.
Sure.
It's still going to be viable no matter what the scale is, right?
Yeah, sure. So we both love the micropayments use case. If I were to operate a use case that needed micropayments at 1 cent that I could charge 1.5 cents for, and I was using an architecture that used the Hedera token service and doing transfers at 1/10 of a cent, there is margin. There's plenty of margin there. If I was just charging 0.2, I could only charge 0.2 of a cent per transaction, and my underlying costs were 0.1, and then I had all the other business expenses on top to operate it. It would be marginal or negative in terms of revenue. So you do have to get the commercials of the business right, and that I use that example because it's one that's very close to my heart. And if I can only charge 0.2 of a cent for a transaction for whatever use case that might be, then I might not use HTS, but Hedera offers HCS. So I change my architecture in order that I use the 100th of a cent price point or cost point for those transactions within that use case. Hedera does give lots of optionality around the services because of the way it's built, but one has to architect a solution that is appropriate for the product, and the product has to find market fit too. So all of these things need to be considered. It's not just about the technology.
All right, so Bitcoinspiracy Theory asks, can Rob address or speculate on the SpaceX Hedera partnership mentioned in the Novik report and how he thinks the community should react to it? Now, there has been some discussion about this. We're pretty sure, at least from my perspective, it looks like they were just talking about the fact that CLSQ and YSAT are leveraging SpaceX to get their satellites into space. And of course, we know that there's a relationship there between Carlos and Elon Musk. But Rob, I know that you're following Novik fairly closely. I don't know, did you see this when it was posted by Jen Finn?
I did, yes, I saw it.
Yeah.
So Novik, they're a Sydney-based company, and I know the CEO really well, and they're formerly called Timeless, so they're very well known within the Guardian ecosystem. They're super strong supporters of Hedera. They're also an Australian Stock Exchange listed business, an ASX listed business. So when they make an announcement that potentially market moving, they have to report through the ASX. There's kind of market reporting responsibilities that they have to follow. So that's the source of that report. And they were announcing that they were acquiring HBAR and investing in the Hedera network on which they were building. So they have to make that announcement because it's an obligation on them because they're a listed business. Now, some of the notes associated with that report, the bullet points that were kind of highlighted, were kind of background information to give more color, I guess, to the report for those who are reading it in the market, maybe justification or just some kind of background content. And I haven't spoken to them specifically about this, but there is lots and lots of news all the time, as we know, because we talk about it all the time. And they would have drawn on some of the news items, and that's all it is. There was news about CLSQ and WiseKey and their relationship with SpaceX, and it was just put into a single statement within that report. So I don't think that the community should read anything into it whatsoever more than what is stated there. There is no inside information, or there is no alpha there at all. It's just a reflection of what we talk about all the time for an audience that may not have known it, under an obligation to report on the acquiring of that HBAR.
But still exciting that whole thing, everything that's going on there is something to be excited about for the entire
whenever
Hedera
a piece of
community.
these news items gets picked up in these different forums. I did a meetup last night in Sydney, which we sponsored. Really, really well attended. Talking about Hedera, I put a deck together. Every time I seem to have to put a new deck together because I like to talk about the recent things. And it's a really heavily loaded deck. A slide per theme that we're addressing, everything from deep in all the way through to gaming, Earthlings and Lithos and everything, plus all about burgeoning DeFi ecosystem and Bonzo, and there's news all the time, and the engagement was great because we tend to, in the Web3 space, you kind of go down rabbit holes and you consider chains to be a particular, focused on a particular theme, but we had nearly 60, 70 people in this room sort of going, wow, I didn't know Hedera did gaming. I didn't know they did. Are they really doing deep in, or let's talk more about tokenization? And, we were able to have this really broad spectrum. And so and some of those people were in that audience, they were there because they'd seen Hedera mentioned in this ASX listed market report or market announcement, and did a bit of digging, and then came along and sort of asked me questions afterwards, and told me that was the reason. So seeing Hedera pop up in unexpected places, as we are seeing now after the last few weeks, people are sitting up and taking more attention. We shouldn't worry about the source of those new eyeballs on Hedera. Obviously, we should correct it. It's beholden on us to correct it if it's absolutely wrong. But at this point in the market, all news is good news.
Absolutely. So the next question is also about SpaceX. It comes from Money Be Constant. Love the name, by the way, but they ask, when watch party for the SpaceX launch of Hedera and CLSQ into space? So to start off, CLSQ already has 17 Pico satellites that are up there. The next launch is going to put more up there, and then they're going to do a final. I think they want 100 total to have their full constellation. But this is all around having the ability to do transactional Internet of Things. So they're going to have a token that's going to be that medium of exchange between, all kinds of things, smart cities and autonomous vehicles, smart homes, and on down the line. And the next launch is going to be taking place in late January, I think. And I did talk to Carlos. He is the CEO and co-founder of WiseSat and CLSQ. And he said that this one's going to be from a military base, or it sounded like that, because I wanted to go there in person. So I'm not sure if we're actually going to be able to go there in person and live stream or something like that to it. But of course, hopefully, if they have any kind of coverage, we would love to do a watch party. But we already have Hedera and CLSQ up there in space. We're just adding to it now.
Yeah, it would be amazing, wouldn't it, to even to be there in person as well, just to be on those foldable chairs, miles away, watching the rockets take off. It'd be incredible.
Well, we'll see if we can figure something out. So we do have one from Rakesh, who just wants to know when step function. Now, of course, we had a step function with @MyO. We've had a step function down a bit, but one of the things is the background. We used to talk about background, everything that was going on that didn't include @MyO, but that has come up significantly as well. So, and especially with the additional action we're seeing now with more trading happening on our decentralized exchanges. But Rob, what are your thoughts around this?
Yeah, I assume he means step up function rather than step down.
Sure, that's what we want to see, right?
And I assume he means transactions. I honestly don't think, we'll see step functions in the future as new high volume use cases come on board. But like I've said, a few times now, I think we're at that stage in the cycle where we have so many projects at a similar stage in their, the startup life cycle, where you've found product market fit, you've done all the kind of the low volume but user feedback kind of iterations. There's a growth in the wider space. There's a lot more interest. The network effect is happening, in terms of bringing people in and using different, applications, different projects at the same time. You go from source to Bonzo to source swap to Bonzo to Hashpack to Earthlings to Karate Combat. So you're kind of staying in the ecosystem now. Your HBAR is the numeraire underneath all of that, but you've got the tokens on top, and you're finding your own thing within your own tribes within the Hedera ecosystem. So all these projects are at similar stages of development, and they're all about to go through this inflection point as more people come in and more people use all of the things. So it's going to be a step. It's going to be a ramp up rather than a step up, I think, as all of these kind of come up together. We'll have these steps as the bigger use cases come on board, but actually, I think there's going to be a let's call it a parabolic curve of growth rather than a step function. I think we're beyond the steps. We're it's the pyramid of all those little steps, but you zoom out and you just see the upward trajectory.
Well, one of the things that I've been thinking about more lately is it's not just adding additional use cases, but every single one of those use cases is going to have an adoption curve where it just gets used more and more, whether it's SKUX or Earthlings with gaming, or, we just go down the line. Now we can see it with Karate Combat. They have 1,500 when they had their first up-only gaming event that slowly went up. Now it's at over 100,000, 120,000. So we see it with that because they're putting that on their website on a regular basis. But all of these use cases are going to have that same curve. So not only are we going to be adding additional use cases, but we're also going to have each one of those individual use cases scaling themselves.
Yeah, and we still talk about step function, but that's just for one metric, right? The old metric that we focused on of TPS will and should not be the only metric that we look at through this next year or two. Through CorpCom, we're looking at new metrics to better represent the health and growth of the ecosystem. And so one could imagine revenue being another curve that we should be looking at, revenue growth over time, which in itself will hide, like TPS does, but hide sub-metrics around which of the services are being utilized in order to contribute to that growth. And I suspect, the growth of our DeFi ecosystem will drive, smart contract-based revenue, which is some of the highest that we can attain. And token service and a consensus service will balance out. So, I think that's going to be interesting as well, the analytics around these other different metrics. And I know Brady comes on and talks in your new DeFi corner with a dashboard of really relevant new metrics, all of which I think are super important to have an eye on. But I like to see these things plotted over time rather than points of, because you need to see its relevance within context. So the growth of the network will be represented across a number of different metrics, which aren't just the step function of the old TPS world.
So next up, we have Pete Taylor, and he's a bit salty. He says, how come Elon Musk has launched 300 rockets in the same time as Hedera has built a 1 TPS use case? Not exactly accurate, but we can cover that here in a second. And then he goes on to say, and why does my local car wash make more profit than Hedera?
I think this is one of our backlog questions. So I wonder if Pete is as salty now as when he wrote the question a few weeks ago. We'll take the question at face value, right? So we talk about TPS a lot. We talked earlier about the point at which we are in this cycle. We're seeing TPS growth, organic TPS growth right now. It's just the natural order of things. Having TPS on other networks is not the same as TPS on Hedera. The TPS on Hedera are all real-world transactions based on real-world use cases and projects, and real users using those applications on Hedera. And our interactions are not. I don't think our interactions are bot-based or wash trades or all of the things that happen on other networks. And it takes a lot, for one even one TPS, there's quite a lot of interactions, sustained, and we've got far more than that. So yes, we've had the luxury of the ATMA proof of concept, if you like, for 2,000 to 3,000 transactions a second, and we all reveled in that. But I have no doubt we'll be back up there when we need to. But I think the key thing here, and we talked about metrics and more relevant metrics. It's not ignoring the fact that the TPS is lower than it was, but there are more relevant metrics, and I personally think revenue is a really key one. But the range of projects, as I said earlier, all those amazing projects, and I'm only talking about this so much now is because I spent a lot of time yesterday in advance of the meetup putting a presentation together to talk about all of these things. And I was inspired by a lot of the content that you've put out, because you kind of track a lot of them, but you don't track them all. And so, my Googling reminded me of the likes of Zenny, for example, or all of the games, Slime World, or what we're doing, basically new announcements every single day, all of which I was trying to bring into this deck, and there was far more than I could even deliver. I mean, Voltic, we just talked to last week, has just launched high value designer goods on chain. You've got the amazing Cast Capital. So I mean, there's some great stuff, and then there's all the sustainability projects. So I'm just really, really, really bullish on the ecosystem, because TPS is not the be all and end all. It's the builders who have come to Hedera for the right reasons and are staying and building. Many of them without foundation support, without grants. They're doing it with their own funds. They're doing it, with their own sweat, and are still here. The early ones have been, hitting all the barriers that you do as a startup founder with, brand new emerging tech, and the frustrations. And we haven't, we've lost some over the years, but we haven't lost them all, and many come on a daily basis. So, I'm super bullish about the builders. Not the TPS necessarily.
Couldn't be more bullish on my side. So we have one last question here, Rob. It comes from HBAR 2100, who asks, have the Hedera team celebrated over a Hawkstone beer yet? And for anybody that doesn't know, Hawkstone, I think they're out of the UK, and they have a symbol on their beer that looks an awful lot like the Hedera symbol, but we've kind of taken them under our wing or adopted them ourselves and saying that's the official beer of Hedera. I haven't had one myself yet, Rob. Have you had one?
I haven't. I'm just Googling them right now. So Hawkstone is made by a British celebrity. Many people may have heard of Jeremy Clarkson. So Jeremy Clarkson has been around in the British space as a host of a program called Top Gear, which is like a petrol head's mecca, and has a very sardonic approach to life. Is probably to the right of Genghis Khan in terms of some of his beliefs. But he has a farm. He has a very big farm in the UK, and is now on, I think, Amazon Prime with a program called Clarkson's Farm, which is great entertainment, because he's got a Lamborghini tractor and gets everything wrong. But Hawkstone beer is his brew. And yes, the H in Hawkstone is the Hedera capital H symbol. Maybe the Hedera legal team haven't caught onto this yet and are going to go after him. But if anyone in the UK wants to buy a slab of Hawkstone and hold it back for me when we next come to London, I'll be delighted to drink it with them.
I think they should just give them official permission to use it. Rob, we haven't had a beer yet, so hopefully when we eventually do meet, we haven't met in person. When we do meet, we can share a Hawkstone together. But Rob, I just realized that I want to expand Sharkbites a little bit. I haven't told you this. I thought about it while we were going through all these questions, but I'll tell you about it once we get off camera. Okay. If anybody has any questions for Rob, go ahead and drop those down in the comment. Rob, please come back next week. We're having a blast doing this, and things are only heating up.
I'll be here. It'll be the pre-Christmas one next week, and then maybe the New Year one with our roundup with Zepsi. Something to look forward to.
So thanks again to Rob for coming on again and answering those questions. That one was about 20 minutes long. The one that's going to be posted on Monday is 45 minutes long, so there's a lot of additional content there. We have a couple things that we want to get into before we move over to network analysis and the HBAR market. We're going to start off with a partnership between Settlement and the Hashgraph Association. Matthew, the CEO and co-founder of Settlement, said of the partnership, "The support of a key player like the Hashgraph Group is a powerful testament to Settlement's potential and strategic value in the blockchain ecosystem. We're leveraging this investment to accelerate deployment of cutting-edge blockchain solutions on Hedera that meet real-world challenges, especially in critical areas like finance, supply chain traceability, sustainability, and data integrity." I also wanted to highlight that the stock of SEALSQ has finally rebounded. It was bouncing around 40 to 50 cents for a long time. I didn't pick up any down at those levels, but it's now well over $1.50. We've been discussing this team a lot. They manufacture the quantum-resistant chips that will go in devices that will eventually use a Hedera token to communicate through their proprietary satellite constellation. There's been a lot of talks lately about advancements in quantum computing, so their focus on quantum resistance is probably helping out. But they also announced a partnership around secure ASIC development and a direct offering above the market. So all these things are kind of working together here. And moving over to our gaming space, Circle of Games has launched its multi-gaming app in the MENA region. They did this at the Global Games Show held in Dubai. Now I know they're launching their token on Hedera, I believe Solana and Sui. Now I'm going to have to dig some more into this, but I think at the core, they mainly use the Hedera technology like we see out of Karate Combat. But like I said, I'm going to have to follow up on that a little bit. And it looks like Hedera Developer Relations is going to be launching a new live stream. They're calling it Hashgraph Hustlers. There's going to be live coding, Q&A, and instruction to build people's skills for building on Hedera. And it looks like it's coming up pretty soon. The first stream is going to be next week. And with that, let's take a look at how things are going on the Hedera network. Transaction volume average remains in the single-digit TPS, but every time I jump into Hashpoint, I see spikes much higher than that. We've also created 69,000 accounts this week, had 750,000 NFT transfers, and 30,000 fungible token transfers. And with that, let's jump into the crypto and HBAR markets. Bitcoin is about flat on the week and up a couple percent over the past day at $101,000. HBAR is up 2.4% on the day and 4% on the week to about 31 cents. Last week we highlighted this bull flag and the potential for a breakout, which ended up happening, but obviously we saw a pullback as well. Still, I'm very happy with what I'm seeing. In the 2021 bull run, HBAR had a few early run-ups, very similar to what we're seeing right now. It took a couple months to play out, but we eventually had a breakout that was even larger. If we don't break out earlier, I hope to see a solid consolidation in the range between 27 and 40 cents, and breaking past 40 cents will be the level to watch. Still, I'm looking forward to January because that would be a similar consolidation duration that we saw in 2021, but also because of fundamental reasons. The Hedera orgs often go quiet in late December for the holidays, and then the real fireworks start in the new year. Either way, things are looking very constructive for the HBAR market. So looking forward to next week. Since I'm going to be down at Karate Combat 51, I'm not going to do a full weekly update, but we do have DeFi Corner coming up on this Sunday. We also have the full episode of Sharkbites from this week on Monday. Then I'm going to be recording another Sharkbites with Rob at some point next week, and later in the week I'm going to post that. So there's going to be plenty of content next week. If you're interested in any of the teams that we covered this week, if you go to my channel and search for any of those teams, I have the Built on Hedera series, which will cover pretty much every team that we cover on here. That's all we got. We'll see you in a couple weeks.